Close your eyes and imagine standing on a white cliff, high above a sea that glows deep blue in every direction. Scattered across the water lie more than 6,000 islands. Now, open your eyes. Welcome to the Greek islands, where only 227 of those islands are inhabited. And almost every one of them is keeping the same secret. These are not really islands at all. Tens of thousands of years ago, the blue water you just imagined did not exist. There was no Aegean Sea. In its place stretched a vast land that geologists call Aegeus. Then the ice melted and the water started to rise. Valley by valley, the sea claimed it all, until only the highest ground was left above the waves. Those surviving summits are the Greek islands. Stand on the rim of Santorini's caldera, and you're standing on the mountain peaks of a drowned continent. On these peaks, people learned to sail, raised white villages, and built harbors that have welcomed travelers for 5,000 years. In this journey, we'll cross this drowned world one summit at a time. 25 islands. Windmills, volcanic moonscapes, and villages that hang 1,000 feet above the sea. So find a comfortable seat and settle in. This is the story of the Greek islands. The story begins on a summit that had no right to become famous. Mykonos is low, dry, and stripped bare by wind. Yet on this rock stands one of the best-known towns on Earth. Its maze of white lanes was drawn as a trap, built to spin pirates in circles until they gave up. The trap still works. It just catches visitors now. And the 5 white towers on the ridge above explain how it all began. They're windmills, built by the Venetians in the 16th century to grind wheat for passing ships. Wind became bread, and bread became gold. The sails stopped turning long ago. The wind never did. At sunset, half the town gathers under the mills, while the same gusts drive waves into a row of houses below that seem to be sinking. That district is Little Venice, where houses stand with their feet in the water. Sea captains built them in the 1700s, and old stories say smugglers used doors that opened straight onto the sea. When the water turns rough, spray lands on the cafe tables. People pay extra to sit there anyway. And every balcony faces the same small island, the reason Mykonos exists at all. That island is Delos, once the sacred center of the Greek world. Pilgrims believed Apollo was born here, and for centuries no one was allowed to be born or to die on its soil. Today, marble lions guard empty streets and silent temples. A holy city, frozen in the sun, 30 minutes from the party beaches. And the next summit, south, carries a stranger legend. Some say it's the lost world itself. The legend rises from the sea in cliffs of red, brown, and black, with white towns balanced on the rim. Santorini's shape gives its secret away. It's a broken ring around a vast bay, the mouth of a volcano that blew apart 3,500 years ago. The blast buried a whole Bronze Age city, and some believe it began the story of Atlantis. What the eruption left behind became three wonders, and the first one seems to hang in midair. Oya spills down the northern rim in white walls and blue domes, its streets resting on other buildings' rooftops. By 10 in the morning, the lanes are full. Stay until evening anyway. When the sun drops into the sea, the whole town turns gold and thousands of strangers go quiet at once. Then the crowd turns around because the view behind them is the real spectacle. The caldera is a bay of deep water where the heart of the mountain used to be. Cliffs 1,000 feet tall wrap around it, and every colored band in the rock marks another eruption. In the center of the bay, two dark islands are still growing. They're the volcano's new summit, rising a little more each year. The ground here never finished its story, and the southern shore proves it. Red Beach sits in a bowl of rust-colored cliffs that look borrowed from Mars. The sand is dark, the rock crumbles, and warning signs guard the wall. People come anyway, for water so clear the boats seem to float on air. Fire-colored cliffs on the rim of a drowned volcano. And far to the west, the drowned world wears a color the Aegean has almost never seen. That color is green, and Corfu is soaked in it. Winter rain feeds more than 3 million olive trees here, most of them planted under Venice, which held this island for 400 years and never lost it to the Ottomans. So while the rest of Greece looked east, Corfu grew rich, confident, and a little Italian. The proof is a capital where the empires turned to stone and kept arguing. Two Venetian fortresses glare at each other across the old town's narrow lanes, the Cantunia. The arcades of the Liston could sit in Paris without looking lost. The palace beside them housed British governors. And in the central square, people still play cricket. Every empire left something behind. But the West Coast always belonged to the monks, and they claimed its finest corner. Their prize was Paleokastritsa, 6 small coves curled around green headlands, watched by a white monastery since the 13th century. The water below is the clearest on the island and cold enough to make swimmers gasp in August. Legend says Odysseus washed ashore on this coast. Still, the shore kept one secret for itself, hidden behind a hilltop village and a punishing path. The path drops from Aphionas down a steep, dusty ridge, slippery in sandals. It's also the best decision of the day. At the bottom, 2 beaches lie back to back on one thin strip of land. Calm turquoise on one side, open sea on the other. This is Porto Timoni, a mountain ridge underfoot, with the drowned world falling away on both sides. And the greatest ridge the flood ever spared still waits to the south. Every island so far could fit inside a corner of Crete. The Greeks call it the Great Island. Big enough for snow on its peaks while palm trees grow on its beaches. Europe's first civilization was born here 4,000 years ago, when the Minoans raised the continent's first palaces and painted dolphins on their walls. Then their world collapsed and no one knows why. What survived is a way of living, and its front door is a harbor. Chania holds it all in one sweep of waterfront. A Venetian lighthouse guards the entrance. An Ottoman mosque sits at the water's edge, and old shipyards curve along the quay. At 7 in the morning, the harbor belongs to fishermen, cats, and fresh bread. Behind the rooftops, a white wall fills the horizon. It isn't cloud. It's a mountain range with a crack wide enough to walk through. The crack is the Samaria Gorge, 10 miles of trail between rock walls that lean in until they nearly touch. Locals call the narrowest point the Gates. The walk takes most of a day, and your knees complain for 2 more. Wild goats watch from the ledges, and the trail ends at a village no road has ever reached. It feels like the island's wildest secret. Its softest one is stranger. In the far southwest, the mountains kneel into the lagoon of Elefonici. The water is warm and so shallow that children stand knee-deep 100 yards from shore. The sand turns pink, colored by millions of crushed shells, while the white mountains hold their snow on the horizon. Snow and pink sand in one view. And to the north, the sea keeps a beach even Crete can't match. There's a shipwreck on it. The shipwreck waits on Zakynthos, an island that plays 2 roles at once. Its east coast is soft and busy, and in the Bay of Laganas, a whole island is named after the loggerhead turtles that nest on its beaches. Its west coast is a wall of white limestone dropping into the deepest blue in the Ionian. And halfway along that wall, inside a cove with no road, no harbor, and no path down, lies the most photographed beach in Greece. Navagio means shipwreck, and the name is literal. In 1980, a freighter said to be running smuggled cigarettes hit a storm and ran aground here. And its rusted hull still rests on the white pebbles. The only way in is by boat. Most people meet it from the cliff-top platform instead, where the ship looks like a toy dropped into a bowl of turquoise. The same limestone that built this cove has been carving quietly elsewhere on the island, and its best work glows. Near the northern tip, the sea has hollowed the rock into arches and low rooms called the Blue Caves. Morning light bounces off the pale seabed and fills them with an electric blue that seems to come from below. Swimmers turn blue inside them. Small boats slip through the arches all summer, engines off, voices down. It feels like the island's final trick. The south coast disagrees. Beneath the cliffs of Keri, 2 white pinnacles rise straight out of the sea. Locals named them Mizithres, after the pointed cheese they resemble, which may be the most Greek thing on this island. Around their base, the water shifts between turquoise and ink blue, and sailboats circle them slowly like moths around a lamp. It's the Ionian at its wildest. the next island refuses to behave like an island at all. You can drive onto it. A floating bridge carries the road across a narrow channel, and just like that, you've driven onto Lefkada. Once an hour, the bridge swings aside for sailboats, and for a few minutes, the island becomes an island again. An old Venetian fort watches the crossing, the way it has for 5 centuries. Most drivers barely slow down for any of it. They're headed for the west coast, because the west coast is the reason this island got its name. Lefkada means white. The white is a wall of chalk cliffs, and at its feet lies Porto Katsiki, the goat's harbor. Named for the only creatures that could once reach it. Today, a staircase does the job. Below, a ribbon of pale pebbles runs beneath the overhanging cliff. And the sea glows a turquoise so strong it looks lit from inside. Its neighbor along the same wall is quieter, and it had to be one back from the mountain itself. That neighbor is a gremni. In 2015, an earthquake shook these cliffs and buried the beach completely, closing it for 4 years. The sea slowly gave it back, wider than before. Now the white wall towers over swimmers who know what this place cost. The island's capital survived those same shakes, and it found a stranger way to cope. Lefkada town rebuilt itself in the light wood and painted metal sheets. Upper floors clad in colors, so the houses flex instead of falling. It looks like nowhere else in Greece. Yachts pack the marina, and the canal glows at dusk. From here, the route turns north toward a pine-covered speck with more than 60 beaches. The most famous one can't be reached on foot at all. That speck is Skiathos, the first of the Sporades, barely 7 miles across. Pine forest covers it almost to the waterline, so thick the island looks dressed in green velvet. Around its edges curl more than 60 beaches. And the busiest of them, Koukouniris, hides behind its own lagoon and a wall of stone pines. It's a lot of shoreline for a place this small. The harbor, though, keeps the island's oldest secret in plain sight. Skiathos town spills down to the water in red roofs and white walls. And right in the middle of its old port sits the Bortsi, a tiny pine-topped peninsula that once carried a fortress. Ferries, fishing boats, and water taxis jostle around it all day. At dusk, the whole waterfront lights up, and the little peninsula glows like a lantern in the harbor's mouth. Still, everything on this side of the island is the easy part. Its most famous face turns north, where no road has ever gone. Lalaria can only be reached by boat. The beach is a sweep of smooth white pebbles under pale cliffs, pierced at one end by a natural stone arch. And the white seabed turns the water a silver blue that photographs refuse to exaggerate. There's no shade, no taverna, and by noon the pebbles burn bare feet. Nobody seems to mind. Far to the south, in the heart of the Cyclades, the journey's next summit keeps a stranger landmark. A marble gate, 25 centuries old, standing wide open onto nothing at all. The marble gate stands at the mouth of Naxos harbor, and every ferry glides in beneath it. It's the doorway of a temple that was never finished. Behind it rises the largest island in the Cyclades. A place so fertile it kept feeding its people while drier neighbors went hungry. The port town climbs in white steps to a castle raised by a Venetian duke 700 years ago. But the island's story begins with that empty doorway. Locals call it the Portara. Around 530 years before Christ, the island's ruler began a temple to Apollo, meant to outshine every shrine in Greece. Then war came, the money ran out, and only the doorway ever stood. Its 3 marble slabs weigh about 20 tons each, too heavy for anyone to carry off, so there they stay. At sunset, half the town drifts onto the causeway to watch the sun drop through the empty frame. The marble came from villages high in the island's spine. Those villages are still up there, strung beneath the highest peaks in the Cyclades. Halki comes first, a huddle of neoclassical houses and olive groves that once served as the island's capital. Aperanthos sits higher, and its lanes are paved with marble. Polished slick by 1,000 years of footsteps. Its people still carry a Cretan accent, a trace of families who crossed the sea long ago. In winter, the clouds settle right onto the rooftops, and the marble underfoot turns treacherous. Far to the southeast, the next island guards its harbor with a crusader castle. Its real hero, though, was a doctor born there 24 centuries ago. and new doctors still repeat his words today. That doctor was Hippocrates, and Kos was his island. He was born here around 460 years before Christ, in an age when sickness was blamed on angry gods. He taught that disease had causes you could observe, and the oath that carries his name still opens medical careers around the world. The harbor town that raised him now shelters behind a massive stone castle. And the castle explains who else wanted this island. The Knights of St. John razed Narantia Castle in the 1400s to guard the narrow strait between Kos and the Turkish coast, water calm enough to swim on a good day. Its walls climb straight from the harbor mouth, and every boat that enters passes beneath them. Behind the walls, the town lies flat and open, rebuilt low and wide after an earthquake leveled it in 1933. The shaking exposed whole streets of the ancient city, so Roman columns now stand between cafes and bus stops. It gives the place an odd, patched-together honesty. The island's most loved landmark, though, is barely bigger than a house. A rock called Kastri rises just off the southern beach of Agios Stephanos, close enough to swim to, with a tiny blue-domed chapel balanced on top. Swimmers who make the crossing climb up and ring its bell. Around it, the water shades from glass clear to deep blue within a few strokes. From that same beach, the next island of this journey shows on the horizon, gray, steep, and vertical. Its cliffs left almost no room for farms, so its people made their living down at the bottom of the sea. Sponges made Kalymnos rich, and the trade nearly emptied it. For over a century, its men sailed out each spring to work the seabed, first diving on a single breath, later sealed inside brass helmets and rubber suits. The suits let them go deeper, and the deep crippled them by the hundreds before anyone understood why. The harbor they sailed from, Phthia, still stacks its houses in bright tiers around the bay. Wealth pulled up one sponge at a time. Just offshore, a mountain stands alone in the water. It used to be attached. That mountain is Telendos, and it broke away 14 centuries ago when an earthquake dropped the land between them into the sea. The channel is barely 700 meters wide, and no bridge, no road, and no car has ever crossed it. A single line of houses faces the water, served by little boats that shuttle back and forth all day. At dusk, the strait turns copper, and Telendos looks like exactly what it is: a summit cut off mid-slide. The cliffs above the coast road opposite, though, are what fill the ferries now. People cross the world just to hang from them. Kalymnos limestone is steep, sharp, and full of pockets, which makes it some of the best climbing rock on Earth. Word spread in the late 1990s, and now each spring and autumn, the walls above Missouri fill with ropes and chalk dust. In the cave called Grande Grotta, climbers dangle upside down from stone curtains 40 meters off the ground. Fingers tear and forearms give out long before the view does. Far away in the Ionian Sea, the journey's next island answers all this gray stone with a curve of white. A beach so bright it seems lit from underneath. That beach belongs to Kefalonia, the largest island in the Ionian. Its limestone spine climbs past 1,600 meters, the highest ground in these waters. In 1953, an earthquake flattened nearly every town here in under a minute. And most of what stands today was rebuilt from the rubble. The capital, Argostoli, curls around a calm lagoon. But the island's famous face waits in a bend of the North Coast Road. The road swings around a cliff, and Myrtos opens up far below, a long crescent of white stones pressed between two mountains. The pebbles are pale limestone, and they throw back so much light that the water above them burns turquoise. Up close, the beach is less gentle, it shelves steeply, and the surf can knock adults off their feet. What Kefalonia shows above ground, though, it doubles below. Near the east coast, a cavern lost its roof thousands of years ago, and the sun found the lake hiding inside. This is Melisani. At midday, light falls through the opening in one straight column, and the water turns so clear that the rowboats seem to hover in midair. The lake is part seawater, drifting through unseen channels beneath the whole island. The boatmen row slow circles and let the silence do the talking. One village, meanwhile, nearly vanished in the Great Quake, and its rebuilding gave the island its favorite view. Assos sits on a thread of land between two bays. Pastel houses gathered under a Venetian fortress from the 1500s. Families rebuilt it door by door, and fishing boats idle again in its green cove. Far to the east, at the very edge of Greece, the next island once greeted sailors with a bronze giant. The giant fell. What was built after it never did. A bronze statue of the sun god once stood over the harbor of Rhodes. More than 30 meters tall, one of the 7 wonders of the world. An earthquake brought it down at the knees after only 54 years. And even broken, it drew visitors for 8 more centuries. 2 bronze deer now mark the harbor mouth at Mandraki, where its feet may have rested. Behind the harbor stands the reason Rhodes never needed a giant again. For kilometers of walls wrapped the old town, and inside them, the Middle Ages simply carried on. The Knights of St. John ruled from the palace of the Grand Master, and their Street of the Knights still runs straight beneath the flags. Around 6,000 people live inside the walls today, hanging laundry over lanes the Crusaders paved. It's the largest lived-in medieval town in Europe. Yet the knights were latecomers to the island's holiest rock. Lindos climbs that rock, a heap of white houses stacked beneath a clifftop acropolis. The columns of an ancient temple to Athena stand on its edge, with the sea straight below. St. Paul's Bay closes around its water like 2 hands almost touching. By mid-morning in summer, the lanes are jammed and the stone steps radiate heat. At the island's far tip, the land runs out into water that cannot decide which sea it belongs to. Prasinisi is a bar of sand with the Aegean flat and glassy on one side and the Mediterranean rough on the other. Kite surfers carve both, and their kites fill the sky like confetti. Each winter, the sea swallows the sandbar whole. The next island north is named for a boy who flew too close to the sun. Its people are famous for something stranger. They forget to die. Legend says Icarus fell from the sky just off this coast, when the sun melted the wax in his wings. The island took his name Ikaria, and it has been ignoring the rules of time ever since. It's steep, green, and stubborn, with no natural harbor worth the name, which kept empires and cruise ships equally uninterested. Its little capital, Agios Kyriakos, faces the sea in faded pastels. And on the southern coast, a single accident of falling rock became the island's most photographed corner. Locals call it Seychelles Beach, a pocket of white pebbles and glowing blue water boxed in by pale cliffs. It didn't exist a lifetime ago. A landslide dumped the stone, and the sea polished the rubble into something perfect. Getting down means a scramble over loose rocks, with no shade and no shop at the bottom. Down the coast at Therma, hot mineral water has seeped from the shore since Roman times. And the little spa village still fills each season with people who come to soak. Life here runs warm and slow. So slow that scientists flew in to find out why the people would not die. In the hill villages of the interior, one resident in 3 lives past 90, a rate almost nowhere else on Earth can touch. Researchers named Ikaria a blue zone and went looking for secrets, but the recipe looks plain. Steep garden terraces that keep legs working, homegrown food, herb tea, long naps, and no clock. Anyone obeys. Shops open when the owner arrives, and dinner starts when it starts. Far across the Aegean, on a pine-covered island of the Sporades, a tiny white chapel sits alone on top of a bare sea rock. You have seen it before, even if you've never heard its name. That chapel stands on Skopelos, and a movie made it world famous. In 2008, the crew of Mamma Mia went looking for the perfect Greek island and picked this one. So thick with pine that the green runs into the sea. Sailboats trace a coast of small white beaches, and at Cape Amarantos the pines grow from bare rock at the waterline. The film borrowed the scenery and gave the island a second life. But the locals will tell you the real Skopelos lives in its main town, under roofs made of stone. Skopelos town climbs its bay in tight white terraces. Roofs tiled in faded red and stone gray above blue shuttered windows. More than 100 churches hide among the lanes, some no bigger than a bedroom. For generations, the island grew plums, dried them into prunes in wood-fired ovens, and shipped them across Greece, a modest fortune built on fruit. The lanes are steep, slippery when it rains, and absolutely worth the effort. The island's most famous building, though, has no town around it at all. Just a rock, the sea, and a staircase. Agios Ioannis Chapel sits on top of a stone tower 100 meters above the water. Joined to the land by steps cut into the cliff. Climbing the 200 of them is sweaty work, and the chapel at the top holds barely a dozen people. It was the wedding church in the film, and couples now book it years ahead. From its doorway, the Aegean spreads flat and endless. Far to the south, on a ridge above the sea, waits a village where the past never left. It was so cut off from the world that a road only found it within living memory. Karpathos runs long and narrow between Crete and Rhodes. A spine of bare mountains that ferries pass in the night. Its port town, Ikaria, spreads around a wide bay in the south. And villages like Menites hang in the folds of the hills above it. The east coast keeps quiet coves like a chata, reachable by a road that tests both brakes and nerves. Winds here blow hard enough that sailors gave the island a wide berth for centuries. That isolation preserved something in the far north that the rest of Greece let slip away. The village is Olympos, and it sits on a ridge like a row of teeth. Houses spilling down both sides into the wind. For most of its history, no road reached it at all. One arrived only within living memory, and by then the village had simply settled into its own century. Old customs, old crafts, and an old dialect survived up here while the world below changed channel. The houses cling so tightly to the slope that some share a wall with the bare rock. From the edge of the lanes, the drop runs straight down to the Aegean. The drive up to Olympos may be the best part. The road winds along cliff edges with the sea flashing in and out of view. Bare rock on one side and a long drop on the other. Drivers arrive with white knuckles and a full camera roll. It's not an easy island, and it never tried to be. Back in the heart of the Cyclades, the next stop plays the opposite game. Its little fishing harbor is guarded by a fortress the sea is slowly swallowing. And in summer, its lanes fill faster than anywhere else in Greece. That fortress guards Nyusa on the island of Paros. And Paros has been famous far longer than any of its beaches. Beneath its hills lies a marble so pure that light passes through it, and sculptors of the ancient world paid fortunes for it. The Venus de Milo is carved from Parian stone. On the north shore, at Kalymnos, granite boulders rounder than sleeping animals divide the beach into little pools. It's an island of soft edges. Its most photographed corner, though, is slowly going under. The Venetians built a small round fort at the mouth of Naous's fishing harbor 5 centuries ago, and the sea has been claiming it ever since, stone by stone. Waves now wash across its half-sunken walkway, while fishing boats bob a few meters away. Behind the quay, white lanes knot together into one of the prettiest villages in the Cyclades. And in July and August, they jam solid with visitors holding drinks and phones. Locals shrug and pour another round. The island's older soul lives around the bay, in the ferry port everyone rushes through. Parikia deserves a slower look. A whitewashed windmill greets arrivals at the dock. And up in the old quarter, a Frankish castle wall is built almost entirely from slices of ancient temples. Columns stacked sideways like firewood. Nearby stands the Church of Ekatanta Pyliani, the Church of 100 Doors. Believers say only 99 have ever been found. The last one, legend holds, will open on its own someday. Far to the east against the Turkish coast, the journey's next harbor rises from the water in tiers of ochre and apricot. Its beauty was paid for by the same dangerous trade that crippled Kalymnos. Symi grew rich diving for sponges, and unlike Kalymnos, it spent the money on show. In the 1800s, this small island held one of the wealthiest towns in the Aegean. And its captains built neoclassical mansions in ochre, apricot, and deep red, stacked up the slopes like theater seats. Then the trade collapsed, the people scattered, and the houses stood quiet for a century. Today, fewer residents live here than the mansions once held servants. What they left behind is the most elegant harbor in Greece. Chios is the name of that harbor, and arriving by boat is the whole point. The town rises around the water in painted tiers, and the higher you look, the older the silence gets. From the quay, the town climbs toward the ridge in stacked lanes and stairways. Lovely at 9 in the morning and punishing at 2 in the afternoon. Dayboats from Rhodes pour visitors onto the waterfront for lunch. And by evening, the island exhales and belongs to itself again. At its far southern end, a nearly closed bay holds a white monastery that sailors refuse to pass without a nod. Panormitis has been the monastery of the Archangel Michael for centuries. And he is the patron of every Greek sailor. Its Baroque bell tower rises straight from the waterline, with a windmill standing guard on the point. Pilgrims arrive by ferry, some to give thanks, some to ask. Believers say offerings sealed in bottles and thrown into the sea find their own way into this bay. The next island took its shape from something far less gentle. A volcano built it and left one shore looking exactly like the moon. Milos is that volcanic island, and it has been useful for longer than Greece has had a name. Stone Age traders crossed open water just to collect its black obsidian, the sharpest edge the world then knew. In 1820, a farmer digging in his field here turned up the statue now called the Venus de Milo. The island kept the name, and France kept the statue. Around the shore at Klima, fishermen paint their boathouse doors in reds, blues, and yellows right at the waterline. Cheerful colors on an island the volcano dressed mostly in white. Nowhere is that white stranger than Sarakiniko. Wind and waves have polished the volcanic ash into smooth, pale hills without a single plant, rolling down into water so blue it looks dyed. People wander it like astronauts and leap from its ledges into the sea. There's no shade at all, and at midday the glare comes off the rock hard enough to hurt. Photographers arrive before sunrise to get the moonscape empty. Pirates, though, preferred the island's other white corner, the one you still can't reach by road. Kleftiko means the place of thieves. On the southwest tip, white pillars and arches rise out of the sea around hidden coves where pirate ships once waited out patrols in storms. Today, the only way in is still by boat, and swimmers drift through the same tunnels the raiders used. The water glows pale green over the sunken rock shelves. Far to the north, near the Macedonian coast, the journey's next island is the greenest in the whole Aegean. On its shore, the sea has filled a perfect bowl of stone. Locals call it the Tear of Aphrodite. Thasos sits so far north that its pines shake hands with the forests of Macedonia, just across the water. Rain reaches here more often than the Cyclades ever see it. And the island answers with green from ridge to shore, olive groves running under real woodland. Its capital, Mykonos, wraps around the harbor where an ancient marble city once loaded its ships. On the southeast cliffs, the white monastery of Archangel Michael hangs over the open sea. But the island's most famous spot holds only a few swimmers at a time. Giola is a pool the sea carved into the shoreline rock, round and deep and impossibly clear. Locals call it the Tear of Aphrodite, and swimmers call it the best jump on the island, with ledges up to 8 meters above the surface. Big waves crash over the rim and refill it, so the water never goes stale. Getting there means a dusty drive and a scramble over hot rock with no shop, no shade, and no easy way out of the water. Nobody complains twice. The marble that built the ancient city, meanwhile, never really left the island. Part of it became a beach. Saliara sits below an old marble quarry, and its pebbles are pure white stone, bright as fresh snow against water that shades from clear to deep sapphire. Sunbeds cling to a shore that used to be industrial waste, which may be the finest recycling in Greece. Boats idle offshore just to look at the color. Down near Athens, the journey's next island took a different vow. It banned cars from its old town, kept its horses, and once helped set a whole revolution on fire. Spetses greets arrivals with horses. Cars stay out of the old town, so carriages line up on the Dapia, the cannon ring terrace above the harbor, and hooves still set the rhythm of the waterfront. Behind them rises the Poseidonian, a grand hotel from the Belle Epoque that would look at home on the French Riviera. Pine woods roll over the rest of the island, and mansions with pebble courtyards hide behind high walls. Those cannons on the terrace are not decoration. This small island once helped burn an empire's navy. In 1821, Greece rose against Ottoman rule, and Spetses was among the first islands to raise the flag. Its merchant fleet turned into a war fleet almost overnight, and its most famous commander was a woman, Laskarina Bouboulina, who built her own flagship and paid her crews from her own pocket. She survived sea battles and blockades, then died at home, shot in a family quarrel. The island has never stopped telling her story. And the boats that carried it to war were born a short walk along the shore. The old harbor curls around the island's eastern point, crowded with wooden boats riding at anchor where the war fleet once gathered. At its edge lies a rusting freighter, beached and abandoned years ago, slowly turning into scenery. At the harbor mouth, a stone lighthouse from 1837, one of the first in Greece, still marks the entrance, and yachts now anchor where fire ships once waited. One island closer to Athens, the journey nears its end among pistachio orchards. Above them, on a pine-covered hill, stands a temple so perfectly placed that it forms a triangle in the sky with the Parthenon itself. Aegina lies barely an hour from Athens, and Athenians cross over for one thing above all: pistachios. The island grows the best in Greece, and locals will tell you the best in the world. Sweetened by dry summers and salty air. The harbor town takes deliveries of them by the sackful, and nearly every visit ends with a paper bag of roasted ones for the boat home. Ferries and fishing boats share a waterfront that has been busy for a very long time. Longer, in fact, than Athens itself would like to admit. "26 centuries ago, this small island struck some of the first coins in Europe. Silver pieces stamped with a sea turtle. And its merchant fleet made Athens nervous enough to pick a fight. Aegina lost that rivalry, but history circled back. When Greece finally won its freedom in the 1820s, this town briefly served as the new country's first capital. The harbor that funded ancient traders welcomed a newborn state. And watching over all of it, from a pine hill above the east coast, stands the island's crown. The Temple of Aphaia has held its hilltop for 25 centuries. Its limestone columns worn soft at the edges but still standing in double rows. Builders raised it a generation before the Parthenon. And the two temples, along with a third at Sunion, sit at the corners of an almost perfect triangle across the Saronic sky. Some call it coincidence, others call it design. Far to the east, against the Turkish coast, the journey's last stretch begins on an island that paid freedom's darkest price. On its cliffs, an entire village of stone has stood empty for 200 years. The village is Anavatos, and it has been empty since 1822. Its gray stone houses grow straight out of a cliff top in the island's wild center. So well camouflaged that from a distance the whole place reads as bare rock. When an Ottoman army swept across Chios that spring, tens of thousands died or were carried off. And the last defenders here chose the cliff edge over capture. No one ever moved back in. The island below the ghost village, though, refused to stay broken. Chios had been worth attacking because it was rich, and its riches began as tears. A row of stone windmills stands right in the shallows outside the main town, waves breaking around their bases. They once watched ships sail out loaded with mastic, the tear-shaped resin that grows properly on this island and almost nowhere else. Prized for centuries at close to its weight in silver. Sultans claimed it for their courts, empires taxed it, and modern chewing gum finally made it ordinary. The mills outlasted all of them. Restored, they're the first landmark the ferry shows you. The island wears its age quietly. The small Byzantine church of Crete sits among inland olive groves. Its patterned brickwork laid like embroidery 8 centuries ago. Along the east coast, long pebble bays stretch below hills that rebuilt their villages and replanted their orchards after the disaster. Chios doesn't perform for visitors, and plenty of its beaches stay half empty in August. The journey now turns toward home waters, to an island built by shipping fortunes. At the mouth of its main town, a lighthouse stands alone on a wave-washed rock, with no land around it at all. That lighthouse is the Torlitis, and it grows out of a stone spire in the sea like a chess piece set down by a giant. It has guarded the harbor mouth of Andros town since 1897, was wrecked in the Second World War, and rebuilt exactly as it was. Steps spiral up the bare rock to its door, and in a north wind the spray climbs them faster than any keeper ever could. Nothing else quite like it stands in Greek waters. The town behind it explains who could afford such a flourish. Andros belongs to ship owners, and its capital wears their money well. Kora stretches along a narrow peninsula that ends in the ruins of a Venetian castle. Reached by a high stone arch that storms have failed to knock down for centuries. The squares are paved in marble, the mansions are neoclassical, and the shipping families filled the town with museums that would suit a city 10 times its size. In winter, half the shutters close and the wind gets the streets to itself. At the very edge of all this, one small white chapel takes the sea head-on. Panagia Thalassini, Our Lady of the Sea, stands alone on a low rock beside the town. Whitewashed and stubborn, catching spray from every southern blow. Sailors' families have kept it painted through every storm season, and it has become the town's signature, the first thing every visitor photographs. Between the chapel, the castle bridge, and the lighthouse, Kora guards its past the way its captains once guarded cargo. Ahead lie the journey's final 2 islands. The nearer one is small and terraced, and it quietly rules every kitchen in Greece. The man who wrote the country's first great cookbook was born on it. Zakynthos taught Greece how to cook. A local boy named Nikolaos Tselementes wrote the country's first great cookbook a century ago, and it grew so famous that his surname became the Greek word for cookbook itself. His island still cooks like it has something to prove. Ferries land at Kamares, a bright strip of waterfront tavernas curled along the bay, where lunch regularly outlasts the afternoon. Its beauty, though, it keeps a little higher up. Apollonia spills over 3 low hills in the island's center. White lanes threaded between cafe tables and climbing flowers. The older capital waits on the east coast. Castro rides a whale-backed rock above the sea. Its outermost houses joined shoulder to shoulder into a defensive ring, its lanes barely wide enough to pass. People have lived on that rock for more than 3,000 years without a break. And pieces of ancient marble sit built right into its walls. It's quiet now, more cats than cars. Down on the shore below, the island keeps its most photographed prayer. The monastery of Chrysopigi stands in white on its own tiny cape. Joined to the land across a deep crack in the rock. Islanders say the crack opened by miracle, cutting off pirates in mid-chase. And they've trusted the place with their luck ever since. Along the coast at Paros, fishing boats nose up to a beach the length of a bus. One island now remains, out at the wild edge of the Cyclades. On its great cliff, monks plastered a monastery flat against the stone. 8 white floors hanging between the sea and the sky. Amorgos is the last summit of this journey. A long blade of rock at the far eastern edge of the Cyclades. 2 harbors hold its ends, Catapola and Aigiali, with one mountain road swaying between them high above the water. Film crews came here in the 1980s to shoot the Big Blue. And free divers have treated these seas as sacred ever since. The water is clear enough that anchored boats seem to hang in midair. The island's defining site, though, clings halfway up a cliff. It has clung there for 900 years. The monastery of Hozoviotissa stands 8 floors tall and barely 5 meters deep, pressed flat into the rock 300 meters above the sea. Monks raised it in the 11th century around an icon of the Virgin that, tradition says, crossed the water alone from the Holy Land. Reaching the door still means a steep climb of some 300 steps in open sun. Its whitewashed face rises taller than most churches are long. And from the sea it looks painted onto the mountain. Below the monastery, the coastline finishes the story. The cliffs of Amorgos drop into the deepest blue in the Cyclades. Sheer rock walls running for kilometers, with nothing man-made on them at all. Offshore, the islet of Ikaria sits in the channel like a ship at anchor. This is the raw edge of the drowned continent, the very line where the old land broke and the sea came in. At dusk, the rock burns amber, while the water turns to ink. Every island on this voyage is a piece of that same broken shore. And its story only makes sense seen from where it began. Our journey across the Aegean ends where it began, on the peaks of a land the sea could not finish. Ancient Aegeus lost its plains, its rivers, and its forests. But it never lost its summits. On them, people built white villages, raised temples that outlived their gods, and kept their harbors open to every sailor who came. That's the quiet miracle of the Greek islands. They're fragments of something lost, yet every one of them carries the whole story. The drowned land below and the living world above. If this journey inspired you, tell us in the comments which island is calling you first, and subscribe for the next one. Click on the video that is appearing now to keep discovering the wonder of the world.